Good morning, Year 8. So this is your Friday lesson for the week. So today we're going to move on a little bit from like terms, and we're going to talk about expanding brackets in algebra. Okay, so we know what brackets look like. We know that brackets look like this. And you might think, what does expand brackets mean? And that's what we're going to find out today. So there's a pair of brackets there. So, can you get the title and the date down in your books or on a Google Doc, whatever you're working on today? And pause the video if you need to do that. So, here's a little recap of some of the algebraic rules that we know already. Now, expanding is all to do with multiplying. Okay, so that's something you need to remember. Expanding is always to do with multiplying, and that's why these four things here have all got multiplication in between them. So remember, we don't like multiplication signs in algebra. We kind of get rid of them and we just make the letters or numbers close to each other, put them together with no gap. So a times b we would write as ab, wouldn't we? And then 2 times a we would write as 2a. A times a is a little bit different because it's the same letter. We would write it as a squared. And then b times 3, we've got to remember always that the number comes first and then the letter comes second. And, do you remember those rules where we were talking about how the number always comes first and your letters have to be in alphabetical order? So they're two things that you're going to have to remember for this lesson, okay, that we've learned before. So let's move on to some examples here. So example number 1, pause the video and copy this down into your books and then we can get going with it. So it says expand the following brackets. What that means is every time we do this, we're going to draw lines on. So if you've got nice colour pencils or highlighters or whatever, we're going to draw on our brackets here. Let me see if I can make them a little bit bigger. Oops. Oh yeah, I copied it, which I don't want to do. There we go. I want to make them a little bit bigger. There we go, that's better. Move that one down. So so we've got something here that says 4, and then in brackets it says x plus 5. So what this here, in the middle of the 4 and the brackets, there's an invisible multiply sign. This is an x here, not a times, okay? So just beware of that. But in between the 4 and the bracket, there's an invisible times sign, because remember, we don't like times signs in algebra. So what we have to do is we draw 2 lines on to show which things we're going to multiply together. So 4 times, expand the following brackets means we've got to do 4 times x and then 4 times 5. So we've got to do 2 multiplications. So we get 4 times x we know is 4x, and then 4 times 5 is 20. Now we've got to think what goes in the middle. Well, there's a plus in the middle there, so we're going to put a plus in the middle there. Okay, and that's it. We've expanded the bracket, and that's it. Expand kind of means times, but also get rid of the bracket as well. So let's have a look at the next one. I'm always going to draw my lines on. So a times b is what we've got to do first, then a times 3. So a times b we know would be ab, and then a times 3 would be 3a. Remember, because the number comes first. And we've got rid of the bracket, we've expanded it out, and we've multiplied 2 things together there. Okay? Don't worry, this isn't the only example we're going to do. We're going to do a couple more as well to try and really get the hang of this. But I think the key thing to remember is to put those lines on. Okay, next example. So example number 2, expand the following bracket, n and then n plus 5. And remember, there's an invisible multiply sign between the first n and the bracket. So n times n is what we have to do first, and then n times 5. So that's going to equal, what's n times n? Well, that's n squared, because it's the same letter. And then n times 5 is 5n. And that's it. Done. The key thing to remember is that when it's the same letter times itself, it has to be n squared. Okay? So that's the second example done. So make sure you've got that down in your book or on your Google document, please. Last example here. So expand the following bracket. Again, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. So that we can see properly what we're doing. So again, we're going to multiply those two things out. So 3 times 2a and then 3 times 4. So let's think about 3 times 2a. Well, firstly, we need to do 3 times 2, which is 6, and then we put the a on the end. Okay, so 3 times 2a is 6a. And then we do 3 times 4, which is 12. Now, we can't add those together. We can't add the 6a to the 12 because, remember, they're not like terms. 12 doesn't have an a next to it, so we can't collect them together. So they have to stay separate. Same for this one here. You can't add n squareds to n's. You can't add ABs to A's, you can't add X's to numbers. So, they all have to stay separate. So you're always going to end up with two things in your answer at the end, okay? So your answer here is 6a plus 12. So you're always going to multiply whatever's at the front by the two things in the bracket to expand them. So here are your questions for today. You've got 8 questions to have a go at. All right, to do either in your book or on a Google Doc, whatever you prefer, whichever is easiest for you to do. All right, so these 8 questions here, you're doing exactly what we just did in those examples, exactly the same thing, okay? So please submit a picture of your work to me via the Google Classroom or via email, whichever works better for you. Okay, and if you're doing it on a Google Doc or slides or whatever you prefer, you can share that with me once you've finished it. If you're stuck on any of the questions, please ask me. Don't just give up and think, oh, I can't do this. Ask me, because I can help you with everything, okay? So please get in touch if you're stuck with anything. Once you've done your work, I have done answers for you, so you can check your answers, okay? Once you've finished them, don't check before, otherwise you'll be cheating yourself, won't you? Okay, and mark your work, and then or just check your answers before you submit. Okay, I hope you have a lovely weekend, Year 8, and I shall speak to you soon.